So we're continuing with question 4 now, and here we're going to be creating a Python program that prompts for the salary of an employee, and it will do it 5 times. It will add up the salary and then print out the average, and the way you get the average is just to add up the 5 salaries and divide by 5. Now, we know how many times we're going to loop. We're going to loop 5 times. And therefore we use a for loop. If you do not know how many times you're going to loop, but you have some condition, continue looping until a condition is met, then you would use a while loop instead, like we did in problem 2. So the key word in almost every programming language for a for loop is for. And then we put a variable in there. It could be any variable at all, x or y, that will range over a set of values. So x is in what range? It is in the range of the numbers 1 to 6. Now, when you're using for loop in Python, it never reaches 6. X will be 1, then it will loop, x will be 2, then it will loop, and it will continue until it reaches x equals 5. It will never reach 6, and some people find that a little bit unnatural. So if you find that unnatural, instead of starting at 1, you can start at 0 and finish at 5, in which case x begins at 0, and then it becomes 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that is looping 5 times. If you include the 0, that is a loop, a 5-time loop. And so you can pick between these 2 different styles. Both are perfectly good. Just you might want to prefer one over the other. I prefer the range of 1 to 6. And then we put a colon in there. Now, what do we want to do? We want to input the user for a salary. So please enter the salary. We put a colon in there and a space. And when the user enters the salary, well, it has to go somewhere. And where's it going to go? It's going to go to a variable, and we'll just give that variable a meaningful name. I'll call it salary input because the salary was inputted from a user. And when that data is entered from the console, remember it's text, it's string, you cannot do math with it. You cannot add or divide or do anything. So the first thing we need to do is convert it to some kind of number. So we're going to enclose that input in an integer function. So the user enters some value, and then that value is going to become an integer. Okay? If we don't do that first, that number that the user enters is not interpreted as a number, it's only interpreted as a string. Now, before we do anything else, let's go ahead and, we're not going to solve the full problem just yet. Let's experiment a little bit. Let's print out that value. So whatever the user inputted, we're going to print it out or output it right away, and notice that it is indented. The print statement is part of the for loop. So if you have something like this, okay, that's wrong. What we want to do is press the tab key and make sure the P is directly underneath the S. So let's go ahead and try this out. So I'm going to enter some number here, 100. I press enter, and then it gives me 100 back. Let's enter the number 570. And then I press enter, gives me the same number back. So you can see exactly what it's doing. It's asking for a value, and it's putting that value right back on the screen. Let's do that 5 times. So I'm just going to continue here. Oops. I'm going to just add in 3 more numbers at random. It's just going to give me the same numbers back. And after I've entered the last number, it stops and it just gives me that value. So we can see that our for loop is working. Now, let's go ahead and finish it off. We don't want to print it out to the screen. What we want to do is we want to total it up. So let's create a variable called salary total. And what is salary total? Well, initially it's 0. So outside the for loop, okay, before we've totaled up all the salaries, it's going to start with an initial value of 0. And let's start adding up the salaries that get inputted. So salary total equals whatever it was before plus the inputted value. And the inputted value is salary input. Okay, so I hope you see what's happening here. Before we enter the for loop, the total is 0. We get some value from the user, some input, and then we're going to add that input to 0. Okay, so let's say that's 500 that got inputted. So 0 plus 500 becomes 500. Then we loop, and the user's prompted for another number, let's say 200. So it becomes 200 plus whatever it was before, 500, and we have a new total, which is 700. And it's going to loop and do that 5 times. And that's pretty much it. We're finished. We are now ready to print out the total. Now, here's a common mistake people do. They print out the total inside the for loop. So if I begin typing right now, notice that everything is indented inside the for loop. We don't want to do that. We are done with the for loop. So hit the backspace. Make sure you're in line right underneath the F. You can press enter 1 or 2 times, and we are now ready to take that total and divide it by 5. So we'll say salary average. I'm going to create a new variable here. So salary average equals, well, the salary total from the for loop divided by 5. And then we're ready to print that out. So let's go ahead and print out that number. And we're going to print out the average salary. So I hope that logically makes sense to you. If you have any trouble with that, send me an email and I'll go through it again. So let's run it, make sure it works well. So we click run, and I'm just going to enter the same number 5 times. That way we know the average is going to be that number. So 200, oops, 20, well, it doesn't matter. We'll just enter any numbers in there. And there it is. There is the average. And it would be nice if we had a statement in there that tells us that's the average. So let's go ahead and put that statement in there. So print quotation marks. The average salary is and that will put 1 additional line before actually printing it out. So we'll try it one more time. So we'll enter a bunch of random numbers here so you can see what it's doing. And that's 5 times. So we've looped 5 times. We've summed it up. And now we're going to divide it by 5 and print it out on the screen. The average salary is as follows.